Good afternoon. Magandang hapon sa inyong lahat. Mayong hapon kaninyong tanan ng mga Bisoy o taga Mindanao. I can see from where I am standing and even from where I was sitting a while ago that the level of energy and interest has already gone down. I'm very sorry I don't have a PowerPoint with all the beautiful images and photos which will impress our high-techy young people and even the middle-aged. I have the feeling I am, of course, obviously, I'm the oldest in this panel. In the same manner, and Winnie will kill me for this, that she was in the other panel. We were born in the same year. Before I proceed, I'd just like to make some comments on remarks that were made earlier. Hirap na ako sa pag-English. Kasi yung ating didesisyonan, ating pipiliin, ating paningin, dadalhin natin yan sa labas. Kumbinsido naman tayo lahat dito. Nag-overlap ang ating mga views. Ang ating mga statistics medyo, prove what we are trying to say. Ang challenge sa atin, yung pagpalabas. Ngayon, hindi ubra yung ating English, di ba? Now, I'd just like to comment on some of the remarks that were made, additional information. For example, Dr. Mendoza said, and it's new to me, that much of the investment, but not really new, much of investment is in Luzon. And if you talk about the budget, we keep on saying, and we have been saying this since 2006, 65% of the national budget goes to Luzon, and these are official data. 17% to the Visayas. So you hear about all those murderers, kidnappers, rapers from Samar and whatever province and from my very own Negros Oriental. And then 18% for Mindanao, which happens to be the largest, I'd like to think, most beautiful and most culturally diverse island in all of our islands. I'll repeat the numbers. 65% of the budget for Luzon, where the 10 richest provinces in the country are there. 17% to the Visayas, where 4 of the poorest provinces in the Visayas are there. And in Mindanao, where 10 of the poorest provinces in the country are. So if we talk about correlating and synchronizing budget responses to problems of poverty, which were discussed a while ago, then you have a problem. Also, I'd like to add to the information that was given by Dr. Magno about citizens' participation. Mention was made of the Open Budget Partnership, which was initiated by a multilateral, and the Citizens Participatory Budgeting initiated by the United Nations. But we have one which is even older, and that is the Alternative Budget Initiative of Social Watch Philippines, which does not only look at local budgets, but at the national budgets, and does not only engage the budget within the halls of Congress and of Senate, but going as far afield as the Supreme Court of the Philippines when we filed our opposition to the Development Acceleration Program and to the PDAF. So just additional information. So what is the kind of leader that we want? From the way the discussions are trending, we want, it seems, a professional leader. We want a rational leader. We want somebody from either of our schools, our favorite schools. We make it a habit to move from one school to the other. Now, what is the kind of leader that we want? What is the kind of leader that those outside of this hall, outside of the campus of UP, outside of the campus of Ateneo, and University of San Carlos, it was mentioned, or even UP Los Baños, want? And sociologist Randy David identifies these attributes for leaders into what he describes as the 4 ideal types of leaders. One is the modern manager, the one who goes high-tech, professional, schedules, etc. The moral exemplar, the absolutely squeaky, clean, inspirational leader. The stern enforcer, really strict, the axe falls where it should fall, schedules have to be met, etc. And the protector provider, which of course is reflected in our dynastic policies and traditional politics. So, ulitin ko, 4 yung types. Ano bang type natin? No. Una, the moral exemplar, and we have had them. The stern enforcer, and there are at least 2 rumored presidentiables who might fit this bill. We had 1 president. And then the protector provider. These are based on the original classic types of leadership. For those who are taking sociology and public administration, the charismatic, the traditional, and the rational. Now, we in Social Watch, like many of the organizations which are represented here, we go through this annual exercise of looking at the programs as well as the personalities of the presidential candidates. And then we make more or less comments, or we grade them, or we rank them. Others have looked at current presidentiables. You only have to read all those columns and those blocks and those blogs. But I will not. It is, and I think we all know it, it is too dangerous, and one runs the risk of being targeted by the attack dogs of rival presidential candidates. And besides, as Winnie said, only one candidate has really come out openly to say that he's running for president. So I would like you to take you. I see so many of you are very young, going to finish college, just starting to work. Many of you are teaching, engaged in civil society work. So why don't we take a journey back to our past and look at our past presidents, their visible attributes, and their legacies. I, for one, if you ask me, who will the Filipinos vote for? In terms of history, in terms of predilection, in terms of culture, in terms of responses, I suspect that we will go for Weber's charismatic type or David's moral exemplar. Not very much of what we have discussed here. But I'd like to be different. At my age, I can be different. Being charismatic and loved is not necessarily a bad thing, considering the magnitude and the seriousness of the problems that we are facing. You need somebody that you really believe in, who inspires you and whom you will follow and support. No? And some of these issues threaten to divide us as a people. BBL has been identified, freedom of information, graft and corruption. Winnie has been unceasing on this. So we need all the hope, the inspiration, the faith, and the commitment that a leader can master. We are not going to vote for an executive officer. That is what the executive secretary is for. Our invisible, never heard of, unpublic executive secretary, who is supposed to take charge of implementing the decisions, the mandates for the executive. That is the job of the executive, to coordinate the work of the bureaucracy. We are not going to vote for a manager, for an administrative officer. We are going to vote for a leader, for a president. And we must never forget that the presidency is not a bureaucratic position. Now you have terms of reference, etc., etc. It is also a political position because leadership is largely political. Now, our voters through the years, we have never been able to understand our voters. We criticize them for voting for charismatic leaders. But however, these charismatic leaders are not just charismatic leaders, period. They had other gifts. So combination yan. And let us look at our past presidents. Aguinaldo. You all know what Aguinaldo did for us. Quezon. Even if he died of tuberculosis in another country, you also know what he fought for. But he got his wish of the Philippines being run like hell by Filipinos. And then you have Manuel Rojas being president at a time with so much pressure from our former conquerors and also from the elite of the Philippines. Then you have Ramon Magsaysay. I don't think any of you know Ramon Magsaysay at all. Out of our 15 presidents, because I'm 74 years old, I was already conscious and of age at the time that Rojas was president. And not many of you will be able to describe, to see, to feel the impacts of these presidents on our lives. Now, Manuel Rojas, this is the Lolo, and please don't mistake me, was one of our most charismatic, eloquent presidents of our time. The usual thing, graduate of the College of Law, started as councilor, governor, congressman, became senator, etc., both in Spanish and in English. Last night, I stayed up late. That's why I could not make what we say in the Visayan, a PowerPoint. We could not make a PowerPoint because I was reviewing his speeches. I also reviewed the speeches of Ramon Magsaysay. Rojas was a guerrilla leader. He was a great crowd drawer. And he was even described as a general, whether it's true or not. You know, generals, you know. But what is his lasting legacy? I know because I wrote a professorial chair study of Manuel Rojas and fiscal policy, which is of interest, economics and fiscal policy. He was responsible for the creation of the Central Bank of the Philippines. A charismatic leader looking far enough to know that we needed a central bank. It was during his time that the National Economic Council, the precursor of the National Economic and Development Authority, which formulates development plans, started with him. And you should read what he wrote about why we need to plan. Because you have the Americans at our backs, and you have everybody else, and you have those whom we got rid of wanting to get in again. And he also created most of the departments you students of public administration and of law are familiar with. He created the structure, post-war structure of Philippine government. But at the same time, he was a charismatic person. So it's not necessarily, as I was saying, a sin to be charismatic. Okay. And he led the government, and this for me is the most impressive of all. At the time post-war, when the Philippines was suffering from a massive, huge deficit, nothing like what we are going now, where people were eating rats and so on. Philippines was the most damaged country after World War II. And he initiated the practice of what he called rescission of expenditures. You know, if you don't have the money and you cannot trace it and you have debts, etc., then you can, even if there is already an appropriation act, such expenditures can be stopped. Also, he's the only one that I know of all the presidents, this charismatic president, whom we think all that he knows is make speeches. He died while making a speech, of course, as you know, in Clark Air Base. He was the only one I know who borrowed money from the US government and later on returned it because he did not need it anymore, because he was able to increase the level of revenues. So, now, let us look at Ramon Magsaysay. we think of much loved presidents, but we can't go beyond 1970 presidents. I believe, and this is my personal view, this is not the view of Social Watch Philippines, and I think yung mga ka-generation ko will agree with me, he was perhaps the best loved president of all time, Ramon Magsaysay. He made huge crowds weep and cry over fascism, abuses of the military, graft and corruption, huge crowds. And I watched up to 3 o'clock in the morning film clips of his addresses to the people. They really hit you right here. And if you hear him, you will vote for him. But he's also known for initiating, once he became president, the comprehensive program of social justice for the first time. Remember, he talked about land for the landless and letting those who till the land own the land, sending off, giving people opportunities to go to Mindanao, which was then considered as a land of promise. And many of the families, prosperous families in Mindanao, including politicians, go back to their ninonos who went there during the time of Magsaysay. And this is why you have a city which is named after a general, and so on. Corazon Aquino cannot be described as a modern manager. You cannot describe her. You will be doing her a disservice if you say that she is a manager. But she belongs more to Weber's charismatic type of leadership. But nonetheless, and this will please Winnie very much, since he was a former member of the Cory cabinet, I believe, and I have written this, only the sponsor of the study refused to publish it, because in that book on graft and corruption,